The night it finally broke, there was no screaming, no shattered plates, just the sound of rain ticking against the living room window and the low hum of traffic rising from the street 12 floors below. Our apartment always felt smaller when it rained. The gray light pressed against the glass, and the walls seemed to lean in, listening. That night, the only real light in the room came from the TV playing some show neither of us was watching and the cold blue glow of her phone on the coffee table. Her name is Alina. Even now, saying it in my head still feels like a habit my heart hasn't unlearned. She sat at the opposite end of the couch, legs pulled under her, shoulders slightly turned away, like her body had already decided something her mouth refused to say. We used to sit closer. Her feet would end up in my lap. Her head would find my shoulder halfway through whatever movie we were pretending to watch. Lately, there was a safe strip of cushion between us, a quiet no man's land neither of us crossed. The smell of takeout drifted from the small dining table we hadn't used. 2 plates, untouched. The food had gone from hot to warm to cold, while we orbited each other in the same room, trading small words that didn't touch anything real. "I thought you said you were starving," I said, keeping my voice light. She blinked, dragged her eyes away from the phone just long enough to look at me. "I lost my appetite," she answered. Her tone was flat, like she had taken the emotion out before speaking. The phone lit up again. Her gaze slipped there automatically, the way eyes follow a sudden movement in the dark, just a first name on the screen, no last name. No emojis, just 3 words, "You still up?" She turned the phone over a little too fast. It wasn't the first time. For weeks, maybe months, that phone had been a third presence in the room, always face down, always close, always buzzing at strange hours. When she went into the bathroom, it went with her. When she showered, it sat on the sink, screen glowing through the steam. Distance doesn't arrive like a storm. It trickles in with the small things. The way she started working late. The new perfume she never wore around me. The laughter she saved for a screen instead of the man sitting 6 feet away. "We should eat before it goes completely to waste." I tried again. "I'm not hungry," she repeated, eyes on her hands now. She'd started twisting her ring, a habit she picked up recently, spinning the band, sliding it up to the knuckle, back down again. Like she was testing how easy it would be to take off. "Okay," I said. The word landed between us with a dull thud. There are conversations you avoid because you're afraid of the answer. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time. But really, you're just afraid the time has already come and gone without you. I watched the reflection of the rain streaking down the window in the blank TV screen. Behind me, I could feel her silence like a weight. Behind her, somewhere in the glow of a city that had stopped feeling like home, was someone whose name had started to show up in our nights. The name I had seen once before. 2 weeks earlier, she had fallen asleep on the couch with the phone still in her hand, chest rising and falling slowly, hair loose, head tilted to one side. The rain had been heavier that night, and the flicker of car lights passing below swept over her face. Her phone buzzed. I told myself I wouldn't look, that I trusted her, that this was nothing. But her fingers relaxed around the phone, and it slipped just enough for the screen to tilt toward me. A message preview, a thread of texts. He had a simple, short name, Liam, the kind of name you write quickly, easily. "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" I remember my throat going dry, my body going very still. The show on TV kept playing, people laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. I didn't scroll, didn't open the thread, didn't take screenshots or send the messages to myself. I just stared at her face while she slept, at the tiny crease that had formed between her brows, the one I used to kiss away. I could have woken her up right then. Could have said his name out loud and watched the color drain from her face. Instead, I put the phone gently back into her hand, stood up, and walked to the kitchen like my life hadn't just been quietly rearranged. That was the first time I chose silence, not out of strength, out of fear. Now, weeks later, the same name had become a familiar ghost, same late messages, same guarded posture, same careful lies about projects and clients and meetings that ran over. "I'm going to bed," she announced suddenly, breaking through my thoughts. "It's barely 9, I said. "I'm exhausted, Daniel." My name in her mouth didn't sound like home anymore. It sounded like an excuse. She picked up her phone, her charger, her glass of water, little ritual bundles of her evening, and stood. Her gaze skimmed past me toward the hallway. "You're working from home tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah." She hesitated like she had almost forgotten. "Right, okay." She walked past me, the faint scent of that new perfume trailing behind her. Something floral and sharp, something I had never bought her. I sat there alone for a long time after the bedroom door clicked shut, the untouched dinner cooling on the table, the rain softening against the glass. At some point, the silence became too loud. I stood, gathered the plates, scraped the uneaten food into the trash. rinsed dishes under lukewarm water that fogged the edges of the sink. The normal motions of a husband in a marriage he still wanted to believe in. I went to our bedroom later, moving carefully so I wouldn't wake her. She lay on her side, back toward my empty half of the bed. Her phone rested on the nightstand, plugged in, dark. For a long time, I just watched the faint rise and fall of her shoulders, the distant red blink of the city's tallest building reflected in the window, the blurred lights, the constant drizzle. Eventually, I lay down on my side, facing the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. What finally did arrive was a sound, barely there, the softest chime. Her phone vibrated once against the wooden nightstand. The screen lit up the room in a pale blue wash. Her hand shot out before she was fully awake. She grabbed the phone, turned her body slightly away, screen hidden from me. I closed my eyes too late. I had already seen the name. Liam, she typed quickly under the covers. No words spoken, just the faint, rhythmic tapping of her thumbs in the dark between us. Eventually, she settled again. Her breathing evened out. The screen went dark. I stared at the ceiling, the glow of the morning alarm icon still faintly visible on her phone. Somewhere in that moment, the shape of my life shifted, not with a crash, but with a quiet, irreversible tilt. The next morning, the rain hadn't stopped. Fog pressed low over the city. I made coffee in the tiny kitchen, while the kettle hissed and the hum of traffic below sounded more distant than ever. Alina moved around the apartment with that strange, distracted energy, half here, half elsewhere. She poured coffee, barely tasted it. She checked the time, checked her phone. I might be late tonight, she said, not meeting my eyes. Another meeting, I asked. Yeah, we're closing out a big client. Right, I replied, just that one word. She looked up then, as if testing how much I believed. My face must have given away less than my heart felt because she relaxed. Just a little, she kissed my cheek on her way out, a light, practiced gesture. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there in the entrance hallway, staring at the empty space where she had just been, and realized something brutal and simple. She was already leaving, piece by piece. I was the only one still pretending we were both here. That night, I would find the confirmation I'd been avoiding, not in a dramatic confession, not in a fight, but in an accidental detail so small and ordinary it would split everything open. And when it happened, I would say nothing, not a word, not then, not to her, not even as the life we built quietly collapsed around us. The confirmation came the way truth often does, through something tiny, something no one plans for. It was 3 days later. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky still hung low and pale over the city, like it hadn't made up its mind. I was at home, laptop open on the dining table, pretending to work while the smell of stale coffee clung to the air. Elena had left in a rush that morning. New lipstick, different earrings, the dress she used to reserve for our anniversaries. Big presentation, she'd said, forcing a bright smile. She didn't realize her phone charger had slipped out of her bag and stayed behind on the chair. By late afternoon, the light outside had turned the color of wet concrete. I was scrolling through a spreadsheet, not really seeing the numbers, when the faint buzz of a phone vibrating in the bedroom cut through the quiet. Once, twice, a third time, my own phone lay flat on the table next to me, screen dark. The sound came again from down the hall, insistent now. I stood without thinking and followed it. Our bedroom door was half open. The air inside felt cooler, dim, the curtains drawn just enough to turn the light a soft, muted gray. Her phone was on the dresser, half under a folded sweater where she must have tossed it. The screen flashed with each buzz, lighting up the room for a heartbeat at a time. I stopped in the doorway, didn't move closer, didn't reach for it. I just watched it vibrate across the wood, inching slowly toward the edge. Another buzz, another flash of light. This time I could read the preview clearly. Are you still coming tonight? Liam, the word sat inside me like a stone, heavy. Cold, the phone stilled, the light faded. Silence returned to the small room. All I had to do was take 3 steps and pick it up, scroll, read everything, gather proof. Instead, I backed away. My hand found the doorframe, fingers pressing into the old, chipped paint. The hum of traffic from the street below felt impossibly far. I returned to the dining table, though there was nothing on the screen I could now pretend to care about. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, but I didn't move. Somewhere out there, she was getting ready for a night that did not include me. Someone else was waiting for her in some bar or hotel or apartment, checking the time the way I used to when she stayed late at the office. I didn't text, didn't call, didn't demand answers. I made a decision instead, a quiet, private one. If she was going to choose another man, she could do it without an audience, without my begging, without a scene. I would not fight for someone already halfway out the door. When evening settled in, the room turned darker. I ate alone at the small table, reheated leftovers for one. Her chair stayed empty, the impression of her absence louder than any argument could have been. I watched the clock on the wall crawl past the hours she normally came home. 9, 10, 10:30. No keys at the door, no hurried apologies. No forced smile. The city outside the window glittered in patches of yellow and red, light bouncing off damp pavement. Somewhere under those same clouds, she was laughing at someone else's jokes, pouring herself into someone else's gaze. Around 11, I rose, walked to the bedroom, and took an overnight bag from the closet. Not a suitcase, nothing dramatic, just a black canvas bag big enough for a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a few folded shirts. I moved slowly, deliberately. Fold, pack, zip. My hands shook only once when I opened the drawer where she kept her handwritten notes, ticket stubs from old concerts we went to, photos clipped from photo booths. Little proofs that once it had been us. I closed the drawer without touching any of it. I didn't leave a note, didn't empty the account, didn't break anything. In the kitchen, I turned off the light. In the living room, I took one last look at the couch where we used to fall asleep tangled together, and where, lately, we had sat like strangers watching separate worlds. At the door, my hand hovered over the knob for a long moment. I listened for footsteps in the hall, for the elevator ding, for some sign that she was about to come home and force the confrontation I had avoided. Nothing, just the distant hum of someone's TV from another apartment. The soft whoosh of a car passing on the street below. I opened the door and stepped into the cool hallway. The air smelled faintly of detergent and old paint. The elevator ride down felt endless. Floor after floor sliding past, each one a quiet reminder that I was, in fact, leaving. Not just going for a walk, not just cooling off. Leaving. Outside, the city smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust. The night air hit my face, cool and real in a way the air inside the apartment hadn't felt in months. I walked without a clear destination, just letting my feet carry me along familiar streets now stripped of their meaning. I ended up in a small, cheap hotel on the edge of downtown, the kind of place you don't notice unless you need anonymity. The receptionist barely glanced at me when I checked in. In the room, the walls were thin, the bed too soft, the lamp on the nightstand buzzing faintly. I set my bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone lit up once. A work notification, not her. Minutes stretched, then an hour. Still nothing from Alina. Around 1 in the morning, I imagined it clearly, her unlocking the apartment door, finding my keys gone from the bowl by the entrance, seeing my empty side of the closet. Did she panic? Did she call my name? Did she notice how silent the place had become without my presence filling its corners? My phone remained dark. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under. Sleep came in fits, snapping me awake to the sound of doors closing elsewhere in the building, people's muffled footsteps above, distant sirens. When dawn seeped through the thin curtains, pale and washed out, I lay there staring at the cracked ceiling. The decision from the night before settled inside me like something completed. I checked my phone, 2 messages from a colleague. One promotional email, and then finally hers. 1:38 am, where are you? 1:41 am, Daniel, this isn't funny, call me. Nothing else, no, I love you. No, come home. Just concern edged with annoyance. I didn't answer. Instead, I booked a longer stay at the hotel and opened a rental site on my laptop. I searched for small apartments on the other side of the city, places with month-to-month leases. Places where the distance between me and our old life would be more than just a cab ride. In the days that followed, the text messages kept coming. Can we talk? Are you okay? Please stop ignoring me. This isn't how adults handle things. Not once did she mention his name. Not once did she admit where she'd been that night or the nights before it. My response never changed. Silence, she called. Voicemail collected her voice, her soft curses, her frustrated sighs. At first, she sounded angry, then scared, then strangely calm. I imagined her pacing our apartment, no, her apartment now, passing by the empty chair at the table, the half-open drawer, the dent in my pillow that would slowly fade. Somewhere between the 4th and 5th day, one of her messages changed flavor. I made a mistake, please just talk to me. I read those words in a cramped cafe near my temporary place, the smell of burnt espresso and old wood thick around me. Outside, the sky tried to clear, patches of blue breaking through the gray. A year from that moment, I would remember that message differently, not as an apology, but as the first hint that her new life was not as sturdy as she had imagined. At the time, though, it was just another text from a woman who could not say the one thing that might have reached me, the complete, unvarnished truth. I signed the lease on the small apartment 3 subway lines away, 7th floor. View of an alley and a brick wall instead of the skyline. Too quiet, too bare, and yet mine. I moved in with 2 suitcases, my laptop, and a box of books. No wedding photos, no shared memories framed behind glass. At night, the new place was so silent the only sound was the fridge cycling on and off, and the occasional car rolling by below. The emptiness pressed in, but it was a different kind of weight than the one I'd left. Here, the emptiness was honest. Her calls slowed. her texts scattered out over days instead of hours, birthday wishes, a question about some document she couldn't find, then eventually nothing. Weeks turned into months. I found a rhythm that was more survival than living. Wake up, make coffee in the silent kitchen, work, eat alone, walk the city at night, hands in pockets, letting the neon lights and late trains and wet sidewalks remind me that time was still moving, even if I felt stuck. I saw couples sometimes, hands brushing, shoulders leaning in. I didn't look away, but it felt like watching a life I had been quietly removed from. Friends asked what happened. I gave them the fragments I could say out loud. We grew apart. She found someone else. I left. They asked if I confronted her, if I yelled, if I demanded explanations. No, I always said, and it always surprised them. But how do you explain that sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all? Seasons turned. The city's rain shifted from cold needles to soft summer storms that broke the heat. The ache dulled at the edges, then flared up again at strange moments. Passing a restaurant we used to love, hearing a song she had on repeat one winter, smelling that same sharp perfume on a stranger in the subway. I learned to live around the empty chair in my chest where she used to sit. A year slipped by in this uneven rhythm. Enough time for scars to form, but not enough for the skin to forget why. Then on a soft gray afternoon with the smell of fresh rain drifting in through the slightly open window of my new apartment, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, uncertain taps. When I opened it, she stood there on the threshold. Older by a year, but somehow smaller. Eyes red, mascara blurred, hair pinned back in a way that looked less like armor and more like surrender. In her hands, she held something white. It hung heavy over her arms, edged in lace. A wedding dress. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. And for the first time in a year, the silence between us did not feel like protection. It felt like a question. For a second, all I saw was the dress. The fabric drooping over her forearms like something exhausted. White, but not the bright, untouched white from magazine covers. It was slightly creased, like it had been carried too far, held too long. Then my eyes found hers. They were rimmed with red, lashes clumped together, the skin beneath swollen like she hadn't slept. Rain dotted her coat, her hair, tiny beads clinging to the strands near her temple. Elena, I said, and the word felt foreign in my mouth. Can I come in? She asked, voice shaking in a way I had never heard from her before. I stepped aside without answering. She walked past me slowly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might make everything fall apart again. The apartment smelled like coffee and old books, different from our old place, smaller, quieter. She stood in the middle of the living room, turning once in a slow circle, taking it all in, the single gray couch. The small table by the window, the half-unpacked bookshelf. It's different, she said softly. That's the point, I replied. The dress slipped slightly from her grip. She shifted it, clutching it tighter. What are you doing here, Elena? She swallowed, throat working. I didn't know where else to go. That's not an answer. Her gaze flicked to the window, where a thin veil of leftover rain clung to the glass, catching the dull light. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The city hummed faintly below, a distant, indifferent witness. She finally looked back at me. I was supposed to get married today, she said. The words hung in the room, strange and heavy. To him? I asked, though the answer was obvious. She nodded, a single, jerky motion. A bitter part of me wanted to ask if it was the same dress she had dreamed of wearing with me once. If she had recycled our plans, our fantasies, and handed them over to someone else. But the man who had quietly packed a bag and walked out a year ago had grown used to swallowing questions that wouldn't change anything. So why are you here? She took a deep breath, and for the first time her composure cracked. Tears spilled over, carving quick paths down her cheeks. Because I couldn't do it, she whispered. Because I stood there in front of the mirror in this stupid dress, and I saw you. The words didn't land the way she probably expected them to. They didn't soothe or heal or validate. They just reached back into a part of me I had tried very hard to leave behind in that other apartment. You saw me when, I asked quietly, when you were trying it on, when you picked it out. When you walked away from everything we had without a conversation. She winced as if each question was a slap. I know I deserve that, she said, her fingers clenched in the fabric, knuckles white. I know I deserve worse than that. Do you? The calm in my own voice surprised me. For a second, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft patter of leftover drops dripping from the window frame to the sill outside. I hurt you, she said finally. I betrayed you. I lied. I chose someone else, and I let you walk away instead of fighting for you. Hearing her say it out loud after a year felt unreal. All the sentences I had crafted in my head, the imaginary arguments, the hypothetical confession scenes, I had rehearsed them alone and then locked them away. Now the words were here, real, sharp, carried on her breath. Why? I asked. Just that, the smallest, biggest question. She sank slowly onto the edge of the couch, wedding dress pooled around her like a fallen cloud. Her shoulders sagged, as if the act of sitting had loosened something inside her. I wish I could tell you it was because of some big fight or something you did, she said. It would be easier if I could blame you. But it wasn't, I said. She shook her head. No, you were good to me. Boring sometimes, she added with a humorless laugh, but good, stable, kind. That's an interesting way to describe the person you married, I replied. I know. She wiped at her cheeks with the back of one hand. I got restless. I started wondering if this was it. The same dinners, the same couch, the same conversations about bills and groceries. So you went looking for something else. I didn't go looking at first, she protested softly. Liam was just there. At work, we started talking. He made me feel seen, wanted, exciting again. The word again scraped something raw in me. Do you remember the night I left? I asked. Her eyes flicked up, startled. Of course I do. You weren't there when I walked out, I said. You were with him, weren't you? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. When you came home and found my side of the closet empty, what did you feel? She squeezed her eyes shut. Panic, guilt, anger. At you at first, if I'm honest, for not giving me a chance to explain, for just disappearing. I didn't disappear, I said quietly. I removed myself from a place I clearly wasn't wanted. Her shoulders shook. I didn't know how to choose, she whispered, so I let you choose for both of us by walking away. There it was, the cowardice dressed up as confusion. Did he know you were still texting me? I asked. Still sending those little, "Are you okay?" messages while sleeping in the bed we used to share. Her face crumpled. He knew about you, she said. At least he knew you existed. He liked thinking he was the better choice. And was he? She didn't answer. That silence, more than anything she had said, told me what I needed to know. What happened, I asked, with him? With whatever this was supposed to be. She let out a shaky breath. At first it was exciting. New places, new restaurants, weekend trips. He said all the things I thought I wanted to hear. And then real life showed up, she said bitterly. Bill's stress, fights over nothing, fights over everything. He was jealous, controlling. He hated when I talked about work, friends, about family. He especially hated when your name came up anywhere. It became clear very fast I hadn't traded up. I just traded. She looked down at the dress in her lap. He proposed in a hotel room 3 months ago, she continued. Room service, champagne, the whole cliché. I said yes because I was too ashamed to admit I'd blown up my marriage for someone I didn't even really trust. You built a wedding on top of a lie, I said. Her laugh was jagged. Yeah. Turns out that doesn't work well. The rain outside had slowed to a fine mist. The light in the room had shifted, softer now, wrapping everything in muted grays and pale golds. What changed? I asked. Why today? Why that door? She drew in a long breath, eyes fixed on some point just past my shoulder. This morning, she said, I put on this dress at my sister's place. Everyone was running around, fixing flowers, arguing about chairs, asking me if I was excited. And were you? I was nauseous, she said. I looked in the mirror and for a moment I didn't see myself. I saw you. You standing behind me in that old apartment, handing me my coat, asking if I wanted to grab coffee down the street. I remembered how quiet you were when you loved me, how you showed up for the boring parts. Her voice broke, and then I thought about the night you left, how you never called me names, never screamed, you just vanished. And I realized I had never really let myself feel what it meant to make someone like you go quiet. She swallowed hard. I told them I needed a minute. I walked out with the dress still on, kept walking. I didn't even grab my bouquet. Where is he now? I asked. Waiting at an altar I never reached, she said. Probably furious, probably humiliated, probably saying all the worst things about me that I've already said to myself in my head. We sat there, the space between us filled with too many ghosts. What do you want from me, Elena? Her answer came out in a whisper. I don't know what I'm allowed to want. Try anyway. She looked at me like someone staring at a door they're afraid to knock on. I want you to forgive me, she said. I want you to hate me less. I want you to know I regret everything I did to you. I want. She shook her head, tears spilling again. I want another chance, but I know I don't deserve one. There it was. The thing the old me might have secretly hoped to hear through a year of silence and sleepless nights. Except that man was not the same one sitting on that couch now. Do you think regret fixes anything? I asked quietly. No, she said. But it's all I have. That and a wedding dress you didn't wear, I added softly. She looked down at it. I don't know what I thought, that showing you this would make it clear how far I was willing to walk away from that life. From him. You walked away from me first, I reminded her. She flinched. I know. Silence settled again, heavy but not empty. Outside, a car passed through a puddle, the sound a soft rush of water. Finally, I said, I stayed silent for a year, Alina. Do you know why? She shook her head slowly. Because I realized that no speech, no question, no dramatic confrontation was going to turn you back into the person who used to hum in the kitchen while cooking, I said. I wasn't going to argue my way back into being chosen. Her lips trembled. You were always chosen, she whispered, until I wasn't. Her gaze dropped to her lap. A tear landed on the white fabric, darkening it in a small, precise circle. What are you going to do now? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. I left someone at the altar. I broke my family's expectations. I showed up at my ex-husband's door in a wedding dress I now hate. Ex-husband, I repeated slowly. We're not officially divorced. I know, she said. I've checked the papers 100 times. I kept thinking, maybe you were leaving a door open without realizing it. Was I? I wasn't sure of the answer myself. She looked up, desperation naked in her eyes now. Is there any part of you that could ever try again? Not today. Not now, just someday. Her words drifted into the quiet room and settled there, trembling. I looked at her, the woman who had broken me, and the woman who had once made an empty apartment feel like the warmest place on earth. The woman who had driven me into silence and the woman now sitting here, drenched in her own. Stand up, I said. She blinked. What? Stand up, I repeated. She rose slowly, the dress rustling. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint mix of rain and perfume, close enough to see the tiny lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. My fingers found the edge of the dress draped over her arms. Gently, I lifted it out of her hands. She let go without resistance. I walked to the closet, opened the door, and hung it on an empty hanger. There, between my jackets and shirts, the wedding dress swayed slightly, out of place and painfully symbolic. When I turned back to her, she was watching me with something like fear. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I said, feeling the weight of every word, that I'm not going to answer that question today. Daniel, you came here in pieces, I continued. You're asking me to help you decide what to do with a life you already broke before you knocked on this door. Her chest rose and fell, breath shallow. I'm not going to make this decision for you, I said. About him, about us. About who you want to be after all this. Tears spilled again. So you don't forgive me? She asked. I held her gaze. I don't know yet. The quiet after that wasn't empty. It was full of something raw and trembling, a question neither of us was ready to touch. Stay here tonight, I heard myself say. On the couch. We'll talk in the morning, when the dress looks less like a crisis and more like a fact. She nodded slowly, as if afraid that refusing might make the offer vanish. As I walked past the bedroom, the white fabric hanging there caught the last light of the day and glowed faintly in the half-dark. A symbol, a wound, a possibility. Morning would come. And with it the choice I had been avoiding ever since I walked out into the rain a year ago. Morning arrived quietly. No alarm, no harsh sunlight, just a soft, gray light slipping past the edge of the curtain and pooling on the wooden floor. For a few seconds lying in bed, I forgot she was in the next room. I only felt the familiar stillness of this new apartment, the hum of the fridge, the distant murmur of the city waking up, the faint drip of last night's rain still working its way off the roof. Then the memory of the previous day settled back in. The knock, the dress, her eyes. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there, elbows on my knees, breathing slowly. The air smelled like coffee grounds from the bag on the counter, and the faint floral trace of her perfume drifting in from the living room. When I stepped out, she was already awake. She sat on the couch, knees pulled up, wearing one of my old t-shirts I hadn't realized was still stuffed in the back of a drawer. Her hair was tied up messily, face bare, eyes swollen but clearer than they'd been yesterday. Morning, she said, voice low. Morning, I replied. The wedding dress hung in the open closet behind me, a pale shape in the dimness of the hallway. I made coffee, she added, gesturing weakly toward the kitchen. On the counter, 2 mugs waited. The sight pulled at something small and tender in me. For years, that had been our ritual. Whoever woke first made coffee. We used to joke that it was our unofficial love language. I poured myself a cup, the steam curling softly into the air. She watched my every movement like each one might be a verdict. You sleep at all? I asked. A little, she said. Your couch is terrible. A small, tired smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I know. Silence settled between us again, but it wasn't as sharp as before, just cautious. We need to talk, she said finally. I know. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. I called off the wedding. Officially, my sister is probably still screaming into a pillow somewhere. What about him? I left my phone at my sister's place, she said. There were a lot of missed calls and messages. I didn't read them all. I don't think I need to. You're just going to vanish from his life. The question tasted strange as it left my mouth. He'll survive, she said quietly. He knew who I really was and chose to ignore it. In that sense, I guess we were even. A sad, crooked kind of honesty. And who are you really? I asked. She stared at the coffee in her hands. I'm someone who broke a good man, she said. I'm someone who thought she could outrun the consequences of that. And now I'm someone standing in his apartment, asking for something I probably have no right to ask for. The words weren't pretty. They didn't try to be. You didn't come here by accident, I said. You knew this door, this hallway, this city is big enough that you could have gone anywhere else. I came here because this is the only place where the truth ever really lived, she said softly. You never lied to me, Daniel. Not about who you were, not about what you felt. Even your silence was honest. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth sit in my chest for a moment. I've thought about that night more times than I can count, she continued. The night you left, how you didn't shout or throw things or call me names, how you just removed yourself. Her voice shook. That silence has been louder than any argument we could have had. I didn't leave to punish you, I said. I left to protect what little was left of me. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it worse. We sat there side by side but not quite touching, the way people do when they're standing at the edge of something they can't yet name. What do you want from your life now? I asked. She looked genuinely thrown by the question. I don't know, she admitted. For the first time in a long time, I don't have a script. No wedding, no honeymoon, no pretend happily ever after built on lies. Maybe that's not the worst thing, I said. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but they were quieter now, less frantic. It feels like free fall, she said. Sometimes falling is just what it feels like when the ground you were standing on was never solid, I replied. She let out a soft, humorless sound that was almost a laugh. You always did talk like that, she said, like the world was bigger than the moment. We sat in silence a while longer. The coffee cooled. The light in the room grew brighter, turning from gray to a soft, muted gold. Do you love me? She asked suddenly. The question circled the room and landed between us, fragile and enormous. There was a time when my answer would have leapt out of me, unfiltered. Now I took my time. Yes, I said finally, but not in the way I did before. She swallowed. What does that mean? It means I love the memory of who we were, I said. I love the version of you that met me in small kitchens and cheap restaurants and laughed at stupid jokes. I love the man I was with you before all of this, but the love I had for our marriage, for the life we built, that love has scar tissue now. It doesn't move the way it used to. So there's nothing left, she asked, voice small. I didn't say that, I replied, but love isn't a reason to walk back into a house that's already burned down. She closed her eyes, breathing in slowly, as if bracing herself against a wave. I came here thinking maybe fate was giving us one more chance, she said. I walked away from him in a dress I never thought I'd be able to afford, carrying this stupid fantasy that you would, I don't know, hold me. Tell me it was all just a bad dream. That's not how this works, I said gently. I know. Her gaze drifted to the hallway, where the wedding dress hung like a silent witness. What will you do with it? I don't know yet, I answered. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'll donate it. Maybe I'll keep it a while as a reminder of what happens when we pretend we're okay while standing on a fault line. She nodded slowly. Can you forgive me? She asked again, quieter this time. I thought about the rain-soaked nights, the empty dinners, the messages from another man glowing in the dark room behind her turned back. I thought about the bag I packed without a word. The year spent learning how to make peace with my own company, the way my chest had ached and then slowly stopped aching quite so much. Yes, I said at last. The word startled both of us. I can forgive you, I repeated. Not to erase what you did, not to forget it, but because I don't want to carry this version of you around in my chest for the rest of my life. Her hand flew to her mouth, a soft sob escaping. You mean that? I do, I said. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as reunion. The light in her eyes flickered. I was afraid you'd say that. I know, I replied, and a part of me is afraid too. Afraid that letting you go for real makes that whole chapter of my life feel wasted. It wasn't wasted, she said quickly. None of it was. You were the first person who ever made me feel safe enough to be boring. I just didn't realize that's what love really looks like until I traded it for fireworks that burned out too fast. We looked at each other for a long moment. the distance between us full of shared history and diverging futures. "You're going to be okay," I said softly. "I don't feel okay," she replied. "You don't have to feel it yet," I said. "But one day you'll wake up in some apartment that doesn't smell like our past, and you'll realize you made it through this. That's the day you'll need to remember this conversation, not as a last attempt to fix something, but as the moment we both chose to stop breaking each other." Tears slid down, but she didn't look away. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "you go find out who you are when you're not trying to be someone's wife out of guilt or someone's escape out of boredom." "And you?" "I keep living in this quiet little place," I answered. "I keep making coffee in the mornings, going to work, maybe eventually meeting someone who doesn't make love feel like walking on thin ice." Her lips trembled into the ghost of a sad smile. "She'll be lucky," she said. "Maybe I'll be lucky too," I replied. She set her empty mug down, hands lingering on the ceramic a second too long. Then she stood. In the hallway, she paused in front of the open closet. Her fingers reached out, brushing the sleeve of the dress. "Leave it," I said gently. She turned her head. "You sure?" "Yes," I said. "Some endings deserve a monument, even if it's just a piece of fabric that never saw an altar." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she let the dress hang. At the door, she turned back to me. "I don't expect you to ever call," she said, "but if you ever do, I'll pick up, even if it's just to know how your morning coffee tastes these days." I nodded, feeling something tight loosen and ache all at once. "Take care of yourself, Alina." "You too, Daniel." She stepped into the hallway. The soft echo of her footsteps faded, then the distant ding of the elevator floated up faintly. The apartment felt suddenly larger. The silence wasn't empty, it was clean. I walked back to the living room, the mug she'd used still sitting on the table, a faint ring of coffee at the bottom. At the window, the rain had finally given way to a calm, pale light. The city looked softer, like someone had turned down its harshness. In the bedroom, I stood in front of the closet and stared at the wedding dress. It hung there, quiet, no longer a symbol of a future I'd been cut out of, but a relic of a choice we'd both walked away from. I didn't touch it, not yet. Instead, I went back to the kitchen, ground fresh coffee, and filled the kettle. The morning smelled new, not happy, not triumphant, just possible. Steam rose in slow spirals. The hum of the city folded itself into the background. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't some dramatic line or a final tearful hug. It was this, standing alone in a small apartment, breathing in a quiet that no longer hurt, and knowing that love could exist in the past without owning the future. I poured my coffee, took a careful sip, and stood by the window watching the light change. Somewhere out there, she was beginning again. So was I, and for the first time since the night I walked away in the rain, the morning felt like a release. Somewhere out there, she was beginning again. So was I, and for the first time since the night I walked away in the rain, the morning felt like a release.